Hi, my name is Laura Kramer. Thank you for joining us for this Ask the Expert session around calling made simple. I am joined by quite a few subject matter experts, as well as Eric Truax, who is our main presenter. He is a Teams architect in our Center of Excellence. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
Briefly, I wanted to share our Microsoft Code of Conduct. Hopefully you all are very familiar with this. I am not going to read through it, but we're all adults here and I'm sure we all know how to behave at Ignite. And hopefully you've all seen our session that was that has been televised or has been shown and is on demand right now, Calling Made Simple. I am not going to go through that completely, but I just wanted to kind of go through, recap what we shared that was new in calling. And if you have any questions about these topics or other topics related to Teams calling, please go ahead and ask them in the live Q&A. So as we discussed, we have a new calling experience that is going to be just more of an all-in-one single pane experience for end users. We're going to have things like forwarding and the device that you're using. You'll be able to see your parked calls. As you can see, it's like a single pane to make things easier for you to manage and your end users. This is a pretty exciting one, I think, collaborative calling. It's a call queue that's built into a Teams channel. And so basically a team can triage calls, share a call queue log, voicemail, etc. And it allows agents to see what their peers are doing and mark themselves available, etc. Moving on, we have some new calling plan geographies. As you can see, we are adding 6 new geographies in the beginning of October. And I know this question comes up often. When are we going to add more? And we're hoping to add more throughout 2021, but definitely we'll be adding some earlier in the calendar year or in the fiscal year. We also have captions, recording, and transcriptions being added to calling. And you'll probably recognize some of this from your meetings experience. And we're really trying to replicate that experience in calling so that when you're on a call, obviously you can see the transcription, you can see live captions, and it'll be very similar to what you're used to in the meeting experience. Now, this is exciting. This is Survivable Branch Appliance. It supports your calls even when your connections are down. And this is great for companies that have remote locations like an oil rig or mining or, you know, those types of use cases. They allow people to still make and receive calls even if they're offline. And this is a piece of, this is something that you need to add to your to what you have on premise, obviously at the location that you're working from. But we're really excited about adding that because it's been a requested feature. You can also transfer calls between desktop and mobile. Obviously, this is important for people who are on the go, working remotely, etc. You can now easily transfer between the two. And you can also add another device to an existing call so that it makes it for a quick switch, and you can hand off support for all types of calls, whether it's one-on-one, group calls, meetings, etc. Now we've added a Nokia SBC to our direct routing list of certified SBCs. And as Paul mentioned in our session, we have also added Ericsson, and that was kind of late breaking news that happened in the last few weeks. And last but not least, we have some announcements around our devices. We are going to be supporting Skype for Business and SIP phones. This will be launching the first half of 2021. It will support the phones listed there. And we're also going to be launching new affordable Teams phones for core calling capabilities. This is feedback that we've received from a lot of customers, and we wanted to make sure that we address that with low-cost phones, as well as being able to bring your existing phones for the phones that we have listed below. And with that, the last slide is really just all the other sessions that are available. If you would like to learn more about devices, etc., I would just suggest that you watch them on demand if they've already been played. And with that, I'm going to open it to questions for Eric to answer.
So one of the questions I see right off the bat that is really interesting is, can a team be the destination of call flow in an auto attendant or call queue? Absolutely can. So as we know, a team is a group inside of the tenant, and a group can absolutely be assigned as the destination, whether that be for different aspects of the call queue or auto attendant sections. So absolutely, that's something that we can that is possible to do right now. Let's see what else we got. Want to talk about what the SBA is going to look like when that comes out. So as far as how it's going to fit. So right now, from what we know, the SBA is going to be a survivable branch appliance, which I really think we missed an opportunity to call it a Teams branch appliance, because that'd be TBA, and that's kind of funny. Anyway, so it's going to sit on premise, obviously, because with Teams being a cloud service, the assumption is that in order for Teams to be unavailable, all external internet has been severed for some reason. Right? So this is going to be a device that's going to be sitting on the local network. It's going to be able to do some basic call functions in lieu of that cloud service being available. So we don't know a ton of details in its totality right now, but those are some safe assumptions to make as far as that goes. It's going to be on-prem. And it's going to be a device that's going to sit there. You are going to have direct routing SBC set up for this to function, because that's the methodology that we use in order to take those calls and process them locally. So know that that particular device in the hierarchy is going to be on the network and is most likely going to sit. It may sit in a DMZ type network configuration or on the local network, depending on, that's all going to get hammered out as we get closer to GA, but definitely stay tuned for the releases of that when that goes GA. Okay.
Hey, Eric, I saw a question about Teams voice in general, of whether it's intended for small companies or if it can be used on a global basis for large companies, and if there are any case studies available. And what's the mix of Microsoft native calling plans versus third party is. And I think it would just be great for you to give a quick overview on that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a great question. Just as a little background, I actually was a technology consultant for small to medium businesses before going on to do more enterprise work. So I have a definite passion for that play area of that, 500 and less organization. And while I've worked with a lot of very large organizations, I have always kept in mind what technologies are good for the smaller businesses. And honestly, as many of you probably experienced as well, with the COVID-19 situation that's happened, I've become tech support for a lot of organizations in my social network that found themselves unable to sustain what they were doing before and having to adopt new technologies very quickly. So the reason why I bring all of that up is that Teams calling is absolutely a great fit for a smaller organization. Because what you have is, generally you would have a traditional PBX that is a financial investment, and many of those PBXs would have maintenance costs and specific expertise associated with them, and then a limitation around what they could perform as far as their abilities. And then you also had your traditional telephone line costs associated with that, whether it be POTS lines, small PRIs possibly, or a bundle of PRIs. Those particular costs were all buried into that cost. So Teams calling enables a smaller business to incorporate and consolidate a lot of that spending into a singular cost unit, and provides global footprint, which is such a huge factor right now, that you don't have to be isolated to sitting in an office in order to get that telephony service. It's a big deal right now, because a lot of these smaller PBXs and key systems didn't have that reach. They weren't able to be voice over IP or SIP compatible. Many of them were, digital or even analog. So that Teams calling footprint being global is absolutely a big value add. And then you tack on top of that the educational resources that we've, brought to play around Teams calling, the partner community, going to docs alone can solve so many problems. The Teams Admin Center's ability to perform nearly every voice function for a small to medium business is a great resource that empowers those business owners. Many times they will have a small to zero IT staff. They're doing it themselves. So reducing that administrative footprint, consolidating those costs and extending those functions throughout no matter where they are, absolutely a great fit. We do have some case studies, and those same features and functions, oddly enough, are what makes them great for enterprise as well. Because the cost of going into an enterprise PBX solution, when you talk about N+1 and redundant services and global WANs, no, don't worry about it. We got it. We have the footprint globally across our network that you don't have to replicate a data center's solutions from one place to another when you go with Teams calling. You just need to get to the internet. And so that feature set is a huge bonus to those organizations. And I talked for like 10 minutes. I'm sorry, go ahead. Next question.
No, that was great. I think the net is it works for both small business and large enterprises, and you can mix and match, direct routing or calling plans just depending on your local relationships, really. But you're absolutely right. It works across everything.
So you mentioned direct routing. Probably a good time to talk about how that direct routing SBC relationship works out. Because a lot of people think that, well, in a lot of our story is direct routing is a great way to let a SIP provider that you have on-prem be connected to Teams calling as a resource. But that's not the only way you can utilize direct routing with an SBC. We found many times, especially in larger organizations, that the PBX is still a pivotal role. And while it's a legacy service that may come to end of life at some point, it's not going away anytime soon. So many times what we find is a coexistence, or what we're calling a side-by-side migration. And with direct routing and SBC, we can set up dial plans to allow calls to go through and connect into that PBX, not just to SIP provider, but to the PBX, if the PBX supports it. And process calls back and forth. And the really cool thing is many times organizations are really concerned about having extension dialing, because that's the way we've done things for decades. So we want to keep that ability inside that. Teams calling absolutely support that. With dial plan manipulation, we're able to take 4 digits that's dialed on the legacy PBX, translate that to an E164 number either in the SBC or in the PBX or in Teams, and then normalize that to a Teams user, which will be recognized and route that call. We can also go the other way. So we can take a Teams caller who dials 4 digits. Normally we want a full E164 number, or actually we prefer a name, but that's okay. We can take that 4 digits, normalize it out to what the full E164 is, send that down to the SBC, and then the SBC will send that to the PBX. What's interesting at that point, because the SBCs are so versatile, we can actually manipulate that number however we want. We can take it from 4 digits to E164 back down to 4 digits if that particular PBX can't understand E164. At that point, this opens up a ton of possibilities, which are really exciting. We don't just have to connect Teams calling user to PBX user. We can connect a Teams calling user to an analog station, to a paging system, to any of the other legacy PBX resources that are existing and going to be staying in place. That dial plan manipulation, once you have Teams calling, direct routing to an SBC, and on-prem legacy PBX, you can have them synonymous. And the next cool thing about that is you can operationalize migrating a single user, a small group of user, or large group of user from legacy PBX up to Teams. And if you really wanted to, for some reason, taking them from Teams to PBX. I don't know why you do that, but I mean, it's possible. But you can make that side-by-side migration where you can pilot the solution, get invested in it, have nearly synonymous feature set between the two, and be able to move back and forth based on the individual business needs.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. There are a lot of questions. I must admit, thank you all. I am trying to look at all the new ones that are coming in. Let's see. I'm wondering if any of my other fellow subject matter experts see some in there that they want to ask Eric.
So I'll bring up one question that a lot of people have asked me is, how in the Teams calling world can I differentiate the calling experience from one user to another? Right, and this is a pretty simple and pretty robust solution we have, which is policy assignment. Very similar to legacy PBX is how you would have classes of service, class of restriction, things like that. We have what's called policy assignment, and these policies are assigned anywhere from calling features to dial plans to voice routing that enable a customization of the experience per user per group. Now, we are getting ready to deploy actually group assignment of policy. That's coming up on the roadmap. But right now, so how you would do is you would simply assign it to that group manually. But that ability to customize the experience for the users individually is absolutely a great value add to Teams calling. Let's see what else we got for good questions. There's so many. So better visibility into the call queue call metrics. So that's something that's absolutely on the backlog of looking at. So one of the tools you're going to want to look at is the call quality dashboard and Power BI integrations. We have some excellent white papers, some excellent information on docs about how those two products work together and give a very in-depth portfolio of what's going on in the environment. But that's also something that the engineers are working diligently on improving. I can't say exactly when or how that's going to look, but that is something that is actively being worked on. How does Teams combat caller ID spoofing and phishing? This is a subject that I am furious about because I get so many bad calls. Anyway, so we do have the ability for caller ID manipulation and denial. So if you find that somebody is spoofing a caller ID regularly, you're able to deny that caller ID from calling in and handle that call differently. Now, that's an area that gets very difficult to manage as far as if you're constantly denying caller IDs, there's a good chance at some point the person who actually owns that number is going to call you and get denied. And that's not an experience you want to replicate. So you have to manage those numbers. Unfortunately, that is an area that the technology itself is a vulnerability that we haven't fully equated a solution for yet. That is something that is being worked on. They're looking at different methodologies inside of the stack in order to be able to modify that behavior and do validation checks, things like that. But telephony from its history has trusted caller ID from a source perspective to be the authoritarian definer of that. So what we do now is say, okay, you're the authority over what this call is coming from, but I'm going to filter it if I need to. But if you do set up those caller ID filters where it's going to deny calls, check back on that list and make sure that you aren't blocking too many numbers where you could be getting valid calls from.
Okay, now I'm actually off mute. Nothing like talking to myself. There was a question about real-time call quality monitoring. Do you have any insight on that?
Say again, I'm sorry?
There was a question about the in the area of real-time call quality monitoring, like if we're doing anything new in that space.
You know, I can't say. One of the other experts might be on the phone or might be on the line that could speak to that. I know that that is a subject that people are working on. but I don't know the current status or what that's going to look like right now.
So real-time call quality monitoring is a feature that we are working on. It is something that will be a part of the advanced communication license and something we hope to deliver into the service in the coming time.
Excellent.
Perfect.
So something that we should definitely talk about, we got a few minutes left here, is SIP phones. Like, I don't know about you guys. That was the most exciting for me to hear our announcement of that support coming up, because that opens up just a wide array of possibilities for more affordable phones, more robust phones, things that can do other things, right? And we don't have a ton of details on what they're going to be able to do. We have a couple of restrictions that we were aware of, but that's definitely an area that we're going to want to keep a close eye on with the integration partners, because I think we're going to really see a blossoming of features coming out of that when we're able to take a SIP device that is able to register to Teams and behave in that world, but yet still have all the abilities of a SIP stack as far as integration into other devices and other features and functions like paging units or analog telephony adapters, or things that we traditionally right now rely on an SBC to accomplish. We might be able to do a direct connection into these devices, and once we get them certified and trusted, authenticated, and then have those different features. What they're going to look like, the world only knows, but I'm pretty excited to see how that turns out.
There's a question. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say there's a question around how does call delegation work? Very great question. It actually is a very interesting. So if you've ever been a legacy PBX administrator, commonly you will see a feature called like bridge call appearance or shared line appearance, or the ability for one person to behave as if they were somebody else is the business need that it usually boils down to. Sometimes it's referred to as a boss admin relationship. And it sometimes can be a very sensitive subject in regards to offering a telephony solution. So how the delegate works is that I would allow somebody permissions to use my calling identity for certain features, and I can decide what features those are. So there's 3 currently. Can they make calls on my behalf? Can they answer calls on my behalf? And can they change my call controls? So what this means is, if I decide that Bill is going to be a delegate for me and I sign that property, when I get a call, Bill will also get a notification of a call that says that call is intended for me, but Bill's able to answer that. Conversely, if Bill goes to make a call and wants to make that call on my behalf, in the call window, there's a little arrow drop down, and Bill can make that call on behalf of himself or myself in order to have that delegation relationship. The third one is call control. Bill can go into call controls and decide if I'm going to ring or not, how long I'm going to ring, if I'm going to call forward, which is usually a really big one. Having that call control to say, okay, this person's not going to get calls right now, just I am, or this person's going to get calls on their cell phone or on their client, or it's going to go directly to voicemail versus the standard ringing options that are previously set up. So that's currently how we do that delegation relationship. It's done in the client previously, but now we have the ability to do it inside of the Teams admin center from an administrative point of view, so that if there is a question on, I would like this delegation relationship set up, we don't have to rely on the administrators knowing how to go into the client and do that. A help desk person can then go in and set that for them through the Teams admin center.
Thanks, Eric. There's another question about, are there any prerequisites to enable the transfer calls between desktop and mobile capability?
I believe it's going to be your standing calling prerequisites. So if you're able to make calls and receive calls, I believe you're going to meet all of those prerequisites. Is anybody online that knows a little more about that particular feature? I believe that's all the prerequisites. So you're going to have a phone system and some type of calling. You don't need calling if you're going to have direct routing, but you'll at least need the phone system license that enables you to make and send those calls. And at that point, I believe the client and a phone number, of course, to send it to. But I believe that's all you're going to need.
One more question about virtual phone system licenses. Can you give us a little bit more information on that?
Oh, virtual phone system licenses. This is so they're virtual, which means they're not real, right? But everything's virtual in the cloud. So let's explain a little bit about this because there's some misconception. Virtual licenses, virtual phone system licenses are only used, or their primary use is for resource accounts. And resource accounts' primary purpose is to be the administrative point for call queues and auto attendants. So if I'm setting up an auto attendant and I want a phone number to ring to that, well, inside the auto attendant itself, I don't have a phone number section. I have to actually assign that phone number to the resource account. That resource account has to have an identity, has to then have permission to use that. Well, Microsoft didn't want to actually charge for individual users licensees for call queues and auto attendants. So they created the virtual phone system license. So when I'm setting up a call queue or an auto attendant, especially if I have direct routing or something like that, I'm going to create that resource account, and then I'm going to go in and assign it the virtual phone system license. Now, these are free. You can buy them usually, I think, in packs of 25, and you just keep buying them over and over if you really need to. And that allows that entity of the resource account to be able to function like a user, virtual, and perform the function of having a telephone number assigned to it, having permission to utilize phone system features, things like that. Now, virtual phone system license cannot be used with technically you can assign a virtual phone system license to a user. We have this extra feature where it will not work. And then you'll have to actually go in and assign a real license because that's how that works.
Thank you. That was very helpful. There was another question about controlling the experience for some teams calling users versus others. Can you give us a little bit more information on that?
Absolutely. So, and that's once again going into those policy questions, right? So how does that experience for that user? And many times you're going to want to look at, okay, I'll just give you a good example. We want some teams calling users to call the legacy PBX where we have a direct routing SBC relationship, but we don't want them to be able to make outside calls. Well, there's a couple of points we can look at making this differentiation. One of those being a voice routing policy, where we create a voice routing policy that only has permission to dial the local numbers. And then all the other numbers that person might dial will get rejected because there's no allowable pattern for that to match. That's one area where you can take a voice routing policy, a certain policy, and create the different scenarios that you're going to want to look at. Another way is if you want to turn off certain features. So there's a list of about 12, 13 features, I want to say, inside of the calling feature policy page. And those could literally be turning off calling. I don't really understand why we have that one in the calling feature policy, but it is there if you wanted to enable that. But there's a lot of other ones that make sense. For instance, being able to transfer to PSTN. That's a big one if you wanted to send a call to your cell phone, because you're going to be sending that out through a PSTN call.
Thank you. That was fantastic. We have time where we have 1 minute to spare, so you're gonna have to speed talk.
Okay.
There was a question about getting teams calling to use an overhead paging system or like an analog station. Can that happen?
Absolutely, you can. So you're going to set direct routing with an SBC. The SBC is going to have an integration to another gateway that's on site. That gateway on site is then going to be connected to either through a 25 volt, 70 volt, or some type of tip ring system. You're going to set up a certain dial pan for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 digits, whatever you want. That's going to go over to that SBC, over to that gateway, and activate that paging system. It's going to go out loud. The team calling user is going to be able to do it, and you hang up.
Wow, that was fast.
We only had a minute.
I know. It looks like we're at time according to my clock. I don't know if anybody has anything to add other than thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll continue to monitor the chat for a few minutes as well, the Q&A.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.